Hello, this is Yenna.
And this is Jesse.
We are super excited to be back with another episode going on this ramble of friendship. We wanted to continue that conversation, but this time we really wanted to hone in on this conversation about friendships when we are on a tightrope. So welcome and join us at
At the
the table.
table. We both look at each other and we're like, oof, we're really doing this. Here
Uh,
we go.
here we go.
We're like, we know what we want to say in this episode, but do we want to say it? No. But we're going to do it anyway because it's been very relevant for us in the recent years. And I think a lot of people have a lot to relate on. And it's something that we just don't talk about, but it's
Mm,
about friends that are on a tightrope. We're going to go through how do we get here? Where do we go from here? How should I show up or not show up? And
mm.
when is it time to let go?
Ooh,
Do just preface, we do not have the answers for these things, and that's why we're going to talk through it.
that's why it's question marks. All question marks.
It's another ramble session, so enjoy
Yes.
us just spinning our heads and trying to wrestle with it. So please join us. First one is how did we get here? Yana, based on your experiences and based on what you've heard from other friends going through maybe a friendship breakup, how did they get there?
Oh, there's so many. But I think very cliche, but is really that miscommunication aspect. We all, at least for me, my personality type, we have such a problem showing up with actual care in mind. We are so overly focused on pleasing them and keeping the peace and making sure, okay, maybe I'm being too rough and too dramatic. Maybe I need to stop being so sensitive, let it mull over. But as we mull over, time goes by and we show up in ways that are not healthy because we have unprocessed bitterness or just something, and that way we kind of fade and we cause misunderstanding and miscommunication, and it's this like constant cycle that goes on and snowballs into causing a friendship breakup that could have honestly just been fine if we had a sit down conversation. We're just so afraid to cry, basically.
That confrontation somehow seems like the biggest mountain ever to climb.
Yeah.
And what's worse is when you let time and distance grow,
Yeah.
it makes it even worse because then the assumptions that you already have about the other person start to become your reality
Mm.
when might not be the case if you just quickly clear it up. And I feel like the golden question is like, what do you mean by that? Or when you said this, what were you thinking in the back of your head?
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate more on what you meant? What were your intentions behind doing this? And I don't know, it's just such a simple phrase, but we don't ask it
No.
often because maybe we're too caught up in the hurt of it or
Mm.
and it's just so wasteful because I feel like it could be so easily cleared up and we're able to move on from it, you know?
So true. For me, so long, confrontations felt like the end.
Yeah, same.
But we really need to shift our mindset that confrontation is actually the beginning. I have a friend, she is kind of the testimony of that
Mm,
we confronted and now we're just so close. I do life with her and we can share life together. It was all cleared up so instantaneously. Of course, with the help of another friend. Kudos to her for sitting sitting us down. But really, it was through that confrontation we've embarked on a friendship that could have never been if we never had that conversation. And it's just so beautiful to know confrontation is not putting an end to friendship, but could be a beginning of a better and deeper understanding for each other. Getting there, I'm not going to disregard how difficult it can be and how uncomfortable it is and how icky it is, but it needs to start there.
mm.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to go on like a whole
No,
advice session, but yeah.
you're good. But it's like, yeah, once you get through that and know that, okay, we had a conflict and we got out of it and we're actually stronger than ever, that's when you know you're like, okay,
Mm,
that was kind of painful, but it was so worth it. It's just experiencing that. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have experienced rooming and having to do confrontation that way. Like that was my first confrontation ever. with another person outside my family. And it's uncomfortable, but once you know that you can get out of it and it'll like almost be better for you guys, hopefully that'll allow you to step into confrontation more quickly and more easily.
Right.
But we understand it's not always easy.
It's not
And
always
especially
easy.
if you're a people pleaser, it's definitely hard.
Yeah. And also, kind of on the flip side of that, we'll get to it at the end of our podcast points, but there's also the flip side where sometimes it doesn't go as planned at the end
Mm-hmm.
of that confrontation. And so there is definitely that looming fear. So I don't want to disregard that. But just because that is there, I also don't want to ever have missed that opportunity to have stepped into that space. So,
Mm, yeah, for sure. And then going off of that, it's like, okay, then what do we do? Where do we go from here? You know,
mhm.
it's on a tightrope. We kind of have an unspoken mutual understanding that this is where it's at. What do you do then? Like, what is the first action step?
Ill. Talk to them.
Duh.
I think it's so in this day and age where information is so easily accessible, we know the answers in our head. At least I do, because you just know you're taught, you talk about it, talk about your feelings and talk about that and all of this. It's not just you just don't talk out of nowhere. You're not rambling about, oh my gosh, you did this to me and this to me and this to me. You can do that. But it's really okay, how do I set apart time to reflect on maybe what I might have said and what I might have done wrong? Or that can be a very difficult place because basically what you're saying is I love them so much that I need to learn to set aside my pride.
Mm, mm.
Ew.
That's an ill for sure. And also, I mean, Yana, you can speak from your experience, but it's definitely hard to approach that person if your wound is still fresh. I think it's important that, especially if it's a friendship you really care about, to take that time, even though, like, I don't know how long it'll take you, but to take that time to get to a point where you could see beyond your hurt.
Hmm.
Because if you're not in a place where you cannot see where that other person might have come from, the most likely the conversation isn't going to go well because
Nope.
your conversation is going to be proving your point of why you were in the right or why your hurt is just so important for that other person to notice, right?
Right.
Oh, I've gone into conversations just so wanting to be right
Mm.
or so wanting to maybe quickly apologize just so that like we could be cool again.
Yeah.
When really I hadn't gone into the source of what was the problem, right? And that's not really productive. But I understand just wanting to maybe do something about it quickly or yeah, just trying to, I don't know, get somewhere with it. But being in the process is also important. So I think it's just really checking in with your heart and knowing like, where am I with this? Really seeking out God's wisdom to know the timing in which to step into action and doing something about it. Would you agree?
I would agree. And I think it's really going back to what am I fighting for?
Mm,
Are you here to prove a point, or do you actually want to save this friendship? Or do you want to actually grow this friendship? Because to live in community, there will be misunderstanding. There will be moments where they said something with a tone of voice that kind of came off as just hurtful. And so if that's the only thing that you're so focused on in being in this peaceful state, might as well just live like by yourself forever. Because that's just not how human interaction works out.
mm,
And I'm not saying that you should always exert yourself. That's not healthy either. But at the same time, I think it's really going back to, okay, do I love this person first before I try to validate my feelings? And I'm not saying those are not right. You should validate your feelings, especially if you always put them aside. But what is the root of it?
mm. And unfortunately, things being on a tightrope, it's hard to admit that it's a two-way street,
Mm-hmm.
and I I was in a loss of a friendship, and it was so hard for me because I was convicted by God to just own up to my part, period. like not ask for an apology, not share about how I felt about the situation and how that person affected me. I just needed to say sorry for my part. And that, oh, I'm sweating because that took every part of me to let go, like put down my pride and just say sorry. And I could not get myself to do it. It took me like 6 whole months. Oh, doing that was so painful. But God was able to do what he needed to do in that moment. And it wasn't me. Because if it were in my strength, it wouldn't have happened. Right. So again, it's very much needs to be God led as well. Us and our pride and our bitterness and stubbornness will not allow us to find that restoration. So that's also important to keep in mind. And that's something I'm not great at and still learning to do.
Which leads to that, like, how should I show up? It's really,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, it sounds cliche, but really pray about it. I think if anything else, if not, if you don't hear any booing voice, at least it gives you a moment to pause, to
Yeah.
say, hey, right now I'm at the heat of it. Just like, ooh, I feel it right now. It's here and it's real. I feel the ick. I feel the pain. I feel myself shutting down. But let's pause. Let's put a
Mm-hmm.
pause to that and reevaluate. Okay, what is going on? Where were you hurt? What hurt you? Okay, we know. Now what? How are you gonna mm, essentially go about this? For me, what really helped was writing letters because I know myself. I will immediately go into over apologizing and leaving that conversation way more bitter and ready to dip out. Because on the outside, it looks like, oh, Yana's good. But in the inside, you are about a million miles away now.
So
um,
far gone.
so far gone. And thinking through, okay, what are things that you can help them understand you better so that to preserve this friendship, but also how are ways that you can better understand their communication too. So it's not you just saying you need to understand me. But anyway.
Okay, so what should I do then, though, if I'm ready to show up and that
Mm,
friend is not ready to show up or is just ghosting you?
sorry, I'm the ghosting friend. So I'm like,
Because I've been in, I think this is for me, the reason why this is such a hard topic for me is because I'm wanting to show up, I'm wanting to, work through it. And that friend is just not ready to do that, nor is ready to show up for themselves in their own lives either. And that's not something that, I can control. So
mhm.
what am I supposed to do? Pray for that friend. Yay. Wait. Like that waiting game is so hard to be in, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I think it goes back to kind of the sermon that we kind of posted about from Mission, talking about how to love well. And one of them, or how to show up in relationships. And one of them was basically some form of love sometimes means giving space. And it's so
I don't
hard.
like space.
I love space. Give me all the space. Thank you. On a much more real note, it's because at some point when they're so far gone in terms of not being able to reflect and see where they're at in life, it's just gonna be you running on a hamster wheel trying to get further, but you're stuck in one
Yep.
place, running, 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 running. And at some point, you're just gonna collapse on that wheel,
Hmm.
and you will actually end up coming out of that relationship so hurt and so
More hurt.
bitter.
Hmm.
Yeah, giving that space and praying from afar. I think the first few months and even probably longer, it will hurt so badly because you're just watching them hurt, and you essentially lost a friend for a little bit.
Yeah. That's why those boundaries are so important because it's there to protect yourself too. It's time for you to draw that line and be like, you know what? I've done everything I can to show up, and there's nothing more that I can do, and accepting the reality of where things are at and then taking a step back.
Hmm.
Looks like a loss, but it's actually so crucial for you in protecting not only your view of that friendship, but protecting your heart too. And that's something that I feel like we've had to learn over and over again of how to do and knowing that's what's best for us.
To speak for someone who tends to ghost so that I can own up to my faults. What we really need to work on as people who have a hard time showing up is communicating the need for space.
Yeah.
Don't just dip out, buddy. Don't do it. You're just gonna come back and no one's gonna be there.
Oh my gosh.
And and if there are people, you hang on to them for your dear life because those are the real ones. And I'm not saying you should test out friendships like that. Don't do that. All the people like ghosting.
Yana ghosts
My
me.
cue to test. Don't do that.
All right, Yana, talk to you in a year.
Oh my gosh. But anyway, on a serious note, the act of communicating and saying, hey, I might disappear for a little bit only because I really need to evaluate some things. And this is not because I don't love you. This is how I am able to best work through this. And if I'm gone, and even put a deadline for yourself. It's like, if I'm gone for more than a week or 2 weeks, you can call me and call me out because you know what I'm doing then. I'm spiraling. But really, it comes back to that. Communication is saying, hey, this is how I'm thinking, not because I don't love you. And I do that sometimes with Jesse. I think more often than not. Jesse, I'm sorry, I've been MIA. It's just I'm in my head. I'm sorry I can't show up. And I'm not saying that's good all the time, but because now Jesse knows where I'm at in my headspace, she knows how to now show up for me as my friend. And I think that's been a practice that I've tried to implement as much as possible, just so that we're on the same playing field of where we're at in our headspace. Because as much as we do life together, we don't know what goes on in our heads on a day-to-day basis.
And like you said, it's going back to the previous episode we recorded of being in different life stages. It's also being in different seasons of emotions and knowing, okay, how we're feeling about our life, about ourselves, like it's constantly changing. And that friendship also evolves with that too. Okay, I'm in this season where I can see you so like this many times. And then I'm in a season where I just really need that space.
Yeah.
And if you're not communicating that, like it's hard. I'm going to be expecting you to show up 3 times a week and then you're not able to, but you didn't tell me that. So then there's that miscommunication, right?
Yeah.
So it's tough to continually communicate because you don't want to sound needy. You don't want to sound extra, but that's like really what's going to help be on the
It's
same
so
page,
true.
right?
Because
Yeah.
we're all different. We all think differently. As much as Jesse and I might look similar on the outside, the way we process things and how we show up and don't show up looks so different. And so we
Mhm.
always need to check in with each other, even after we've done intensive healing together, just letting her know, oh, this is a new part of me that I need to figure out too. All these things.
And to our last point, when is it time to let go? We already kind of touched on this, but what we want to say out of this is caring and how that looks is different when you're in a friendship and when you're kind of not in a friendship and then when you're out of the friendship. And that was very hard for me to adjust to because caring looked like calling that friend at 2 a.m. and then caring 2 years later looked like maybe liking their post on Instagram and thinking of them and praying for them. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, wow, how did it start from that to this? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how are you someone that I thought would be my friend for life? And now I kind of know what you're up to through social media. Otherwise, we would never talk, like
Yeah.
in that adjustment, my heart could not catch up to. But knowing that, like, that's the reality of where things are at and surrendering the unknown to God. Like, it's okay to mourn over the friendship, but know that, yeah, you've done everything you can to show up. And if that's just where it's at, then, it's time to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that letting go might be forever, or maybe it's just for a season. We don't know that, right? And that's
Yeah.
where I think the surrendering part comes into play.
It's
Was
so
there anything you
true.
wanted to add, Yana?
Yeah, because kind of like you're saying, letting go, it can be a season because I definitely had a friend where we didn't talk for a bit because they weren't in a season where they could show up, and I wasn't in a season where I was able to forgive. I disappeared, but then we were able to fast forward a couple years later, sit down and have actually like a reflection talk about that, and just seeing how much we've grown. Of course, it's not going to look the same. It's going to be different moving forward from that. But knowing that as we grow, different things come to light, and you will see more of yourself and how you might have been lacking in certain areas and how you can accept certain things. So, like Jesse said, it really is up to God to navigate through that, and really surrendering even those relationships and even those moments up to God to reveal what to do for your next steps. God
Mm.
never underestimates or even looks down upon friendships. He commends it and he calls us his friends. So he values that. Why not bring it to Christ? Telling myself that.
Whew. And wait, sorry, I just remembered one last thing that I want to
Yes.
add. It's so hard to be in a friendship, maybe where it looks like that person is not giving anything, or that person is not reciprocating the amount of friendship that you feel like you're pouring into.
Mm,
And it's like, okay, ooh, I don't want my friendship to look transactional, but I also want to feel appreciated. Like how do you find the balance of that? And I would because I feel like I have a bunch of friends that are in that situation where they're like, this friend is not appreciating me and I'm about to dip, you know? And I would really challenge all of us to really look at Jesus in the way that he showed up as friends for his disciples, for people he didn't even know. And that will immediately humble you because I've been
mm,
reading scripture and I'm like, yeah, I am nowhere close to how Jesus lived and showed up in community and in friendship. So often it's all about what we gain or what we can benefit from being in a relationship. But ultimately, it's
yeah.
more than that.
Yeah.
So just a reminder. But the question I want to leave you guys with is what are some friendships that come to mind when you're listening to this podcast that you feel like is maybe time to let go? Or what are some friendships that you feel like is time for you to press into and confront in your life? What are some friendships that you feel like you need to show up for?
Yeah. Because Jesus did that too. Before he went to the cross, he said, guys, I want you to pray with me. I'm desperate. But they didn't show up. But the difference is Jesus didn't hold that against them. Yes. Anyway, good questions. I know these series have been a little on the longer side than our past episodes, but thank you so much for listening through these things. And I really hope it serves as a reminder. Relationships are hard, but also so, so beautiful. And it's meant to be valued and preserved and also to be challenged. And so, anyway, thank you for listening. And we are on Spotify, we are on YouTube, we have all our updates on Instagram. Stay tuned for the next part of this series of friendship. Until then, bye.
Bye.